I never thought I'd be sitting across from my husband of 27 years while he told me he wanted a divorce. Not after everything we'd been through together. Not after raising two children, surviving cancer, and building our dream home on the hill overlooking the city. But there I was at our kitchen table, the same mahogany table where we shared thousands of meals, helped our kids with homework, and planned our future together, listening to Richard tell me he needed youth in his life. I'm Margaret Wilson, 58 years old, and until last month, I thought I knew what the rest of my life would look like. I'd retire in 2 years from my position as head librarian at Westfield Public Library. Richard would cut back hours at his dental practice, and we'd travel the world together like we always promised each other. We had it all planned out. A month in Italy to start, then a cruise through the Greek islands, followed by a tour of Japan during cherry blossom season. We'd even started learning basic Japanese phrases together on Tuesday nights, laughing at our terrible pronunciation over glasses of plum wine. That was before he met Amber, 26 years old, a dental hygienist he hired last spring. I should have seen the signs: the late nights at the office, the new cologne, the sudden interest in fitness, the way he started checking his phone constantly, angling the screen away from me. How he began criticizing little things about me: my comfortable shoes, my reading glasses, the few extra pounds I'd gained during menopause. But I trusted him. After nearly 3 decades together, why wouldn't I, Margaret? Richard said that evening, not quite meeting my eyes as he pushed his barely touched salmon around his plate. I'd made his favorite meal, a crusted salmon with roasted asparagus and wild rice. I'd even opened a bottle of the expensive Chardonnay we'd been saving for a special occasion. Something in his voice all day had worried me, and I thought a nice dinner might help whatever was bothering him. Margaret, he repeated, finally setting down his fork with a soft clink against the porcelain plate. I've given this a lot of thought. You and I, we've had a good run, but I'm not ready to just fade into old age. I need excitement, passion. He finally looked up at me, his blue eyes the same eyes that had captivated me at a friend's barbecue all those years ago now. Cold and distant. Youth? I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. My hands trembled as I set down my teacup, the Earl Grey I always had after dinner sloshing over the rim and staining the cream-colored tablecloth. 27 years, to children, a lifetime of memories, and he was throwing it all away for youth. Is it Amber? I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. I'd seen her once. When I'd surprised Richard at the office with lunch on our anniversary, she'd been leaning over the reception desk, laughing at something he said, her long blonde hair cascading over shoulders exposed by a top that seemed revealing. For a professional setting, Richard had introduced us briefly, his hand lingering a moment too long on her arm. I dismissed the twinge of unease I felt then. Now I wished I hadn't. Richard had the decency to look surprised. How did you? I'm not stupid, Richard, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I've known something was wrong for months. I just didn't want to believe it, he sighed, running his hand through his salt and pepper hair. I'd always told him made him look distinguished. Just last month, when he'd mentioned possibly dyeing it, I told him I loved the silver at his temples. That it reminded me of how far we come together, of the life we built. Yes, it's Amber, we've connected in a way I haven't felt in years. She makes me feel alive again. He leaned forward, his expression earnest, as if he expected me to understand, to approve. Even when I'm with her, I don't feel like a man pushing 60. I feel young, vibrant. Each word was like a knife twisting in my heart. I thought about our daughter Emily's wedding last year. How proud we both looked in the photos. Richard in his charcoal gray suit, me in the blue dress I'd spent weeks searching for. How we danced to our song, The Way You Look Tonight, and he'd whispered that I was still as beautiful as the day we met. I thought about our son Michael, graduating medical school, following in his father's footsteps into healthcare. The way Richard had beamed with pride, his arm around my waist, as we watched Michael accept his diploma. I thought about the grandchild Emily had just told us she was expecting, our first. How we'd celebrated with champagne and talked about which spare bedroom to convert into a nursery for visits. And what about our family? I asked, my voice catching. What about our grandchild who's on the way? I'll always be there for the kids. Richard said quickly, reaching for his water glass. I noticed his hand was steady. How long had he been planning this? And for the grandchildren. This isn't about them. It's about me. About what I need at this stage in my life. I stared at him. This stranger wearing my husband's face. The man who'd held my hand through chemotherapy 5 years ago. Who'd shaved his head in solidarity when I lost my hair. Who'd researched every experimental treatment when the doctor said my chances weren't good. The man who'd built bookshelves for my ever-growing collection, custom-made with spaces for my first editions and favorite classics. The man who'd promised to grow old with me, who'd bought us matching rocking chairs for the porch as a 25th anniversary gift. joking that we'd need them soon enough. I've already found an apartment downtown, he continued, his words rushing out now, as if he'd rehearsed the speech and wanted to get through it before losing his nerve. In that new high-rise near the river. It's small, but the view is incredible. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Very modern. I thought of our home, the colonial we'd lovingly restored over decades. The garden I planted, the kitchen we'd remodeled together. Arguing good-naturedly over countertop materials and cabinet handles. The marks on the wall of the hallway tracking our children's growth. The memories in every corner. I think it's best if I move out this weekend, Richard continued. My lawyer will be in touch about dividing assets. Your lawyer? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. You've already spoken to a lawyer? It's just standard procedure, Margaret. I want to be fair, as if anything about this situation was fair. I know this is a shock, Richard said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I pulled away as if burned. But you'll be fine. You're strong. You've always been the strong one. I sat there, numb, as he continued talking about logistics. About how we would tell the children, about how we could still be friends. After 27 years of marriage. I think you should leave now, I finally said, interrupting his monologue about how we could handle holidays moving forward. Not this weekend, tonight. Richard looked taken aback. Perhaps he'd expected tears, pleading, a scene. Not this quiet dignity. Margaret, be reasonable. It's almost 9. I can sleep in the guest room and, no. My voice was firm. You've made your decision. You've been planning this for months, apparently. You've found an apartment, consulted a lawyer. You don't get to break my heart and then sleep under my roof, our roof. He corrected, a flash of irritation crossing his face. I paid for this house, did you? I asked, a spark of anger finally breaking through the numbness. Because I seem to recall us both working to afford it. I seem to recall making the down payment with the money my father left me. I seem to recall paying the mortgage alone the year your practice was struggling. Richard had the grace to look embarrassed. That's not what I meant. Of course we both contributed. I just meant legally. I don't care what you meant, I said, standing up. I want you to pack a bag and leave. Now. For a moment. I thought he might argue. Then he nodded, pushing back from the table. Fine, I'll get some things. But we need to talk again when you're calmer. There's a lot to sort out. I watched him climb the stairs to our bedroom now. My bedroom now, and heard him moving around, opening and closing drawers. I remained at the table, staring at our half-eaten dinner, the candles I lit now burning low. How had we come to this? Where had I gone wrong? 20 minutes later, Richard came down with a large suitcase and his laptop bag. He paused at the foot of the stairs, looking uncertain for the first time. Margaret, I said, not looking at him. Just go. After a moment's hesitation, he walked to the door. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. We can talk more then. I didn't respond. I heard the door open and close, then the sound of his car starting in the driveway. Only when the headlights had disappeared down the street did I allow myself to cry. That night, after Richard left to stay at a hotel, he couldn't even wait until the weekend to leave our home. I sat alone in our bedroom. Our wedding photo still sat on the dresser. We looked so young, so hopeful. I was 31 then, Richard 33. I'd worn my mother's veil, restored by a seamstress who specialized in antique lace. Richard had surprised me with a honeymoon to Paris, saving for months to afford it. We had our whole lives ahead of us. I picked up the photo, tracing Richard's face behind the glass. Had he ever really loved me? Or had I been convenient, supportive, a stepping stone to the life he wanted? No, that wasn't fair. We'd had good years, great years. I couldn't let this betrayal erase nearly 3 decades of love. I set the photo face down and picked up my phone. I called the one person I knew would understand, my best friend, Susan. We'd met in college and had remained close despite life taking us in different directions. She'd been divorced for 5 years after her husband left her for his secretary, a cliché she found more insulting than the betrayal itself. He what? Susan's voice crackled through the phone after I told her everything. That bastard. After everything you've been through together. After you supported him through dental school. I hadn't even thought about that, how I'd worked 2 jobs so Richard could complete his education. How I put my own career aspiration on hold to raise our children while he built his practice. I'd wanted to get my master's in library science years earlier, but we couldn't afford for both of us to be in school. So I'd waited, taking night classes when the children were older, finally getting my degree at 45. And now he thinks he can just walk away? With some child half his age? Susan continued, her anger giving voice to emotions I was still too shocked to feel. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted, sinking onto the edge of the better bed, where we'd made love thousands of times, where we comforted sick children, where we'd held each other through my cancer diagnosis. I guess I'll talk to a lawyer. Damn right you will, Susan said firmly. The best one in town. Don't let him take advantage of you, Margaret. You deserve better. After we hung up, I couldn't sleep. I paced my bedroom now thinking about everything Richard and I had built together. Our home, our family, our life, the book club we joined together, though Richard was the only man in it. The cooking classes we'd taken in preparation for our retirement travels. The charity auction committee we co-chaired at the hospital. And then I remembered something else, our finances. Richard had always handled the money. Not because I couldn't time manage the library's budget with meticulous care, but because he enjoyed it. He'd invested our savings, managed our retirement accounts, handled the taxes. I had access to everything, of course, but I rarely checked. I trusted him. Now I wondered if that had been a mistake. I went to Richard's office, a small room off the main hallway that we converted from a den when the children moved out. His desk was neat as always, his diplomas hanging on the wall, family photos arranged precisely on the bookshelf. I sat in his leather chair and opened his computer. Password protected, of course. I tried the usual, our anniversary, the children's birthdays, his mother's maiden name. Nothing worked. After several attempts, I gave up and turned to the filing cabinet instead. Here, at least, I had more luck. Richard was old-fashioned about financial records, keeping paper copies of everything. I spent hours going through statements, tax returns, investment reports. Most of it seemed in order, though I noticed our savings had decreased more than I expected over the past year. Home improvements, Richard had said when I'd mentioned it casually. A new roof, upgrades to the heating system. Had that been a lie too? The next morning, I called in sick to the library for the first time in 5 years. Instead, I drove to our bank and asked to speak with a financial advisor. As I suspected, Richard had already been there. He'd withdrawn $5,000 from our joint account the previous day. Mrs. Wilson, the advisor said gently after reviewing our accounts, I should inform you that your husband has been making regular transfers to a separate account for the past 6 months. 6 months. So this had been planned. This wasn't some midlife crisis or sudden infatuation. This was calculated. Can you tell me how much? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Approximately $75,000 in total. I nodded, processing this information. Our joint savings had just over $100,000 money we'd been setting aside for retirement. Richard had already taken a third of it. I'd like to open a new account in my name only, I said. And I'd like to transfer the remaining joint funds into it. The advisor looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Wilson, while you legally have access to those funds, I would advise consulting with a lawyer before making any large transfers. In divorce proceedings, who said anything about divorce? I interrupted, fixing him with the stern look I'd perfected over years of dealing with unruly library patrons. My husband and I are having some financial disagreements. I'm simply protecting our retirement savings until we can sort things out. It wasn't entirely honest, but it worked. An hour later, I left the bank with a new account containing $127. Zero the remainder of our joint savings. Richard would be furious, but I didn't care. He'd broken my heart. I was just protecting my future. My phone rang as I was getting into my car, Richard. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet. Instead, I called Susan again. Do you know any good divorce lawyers? I asked without preamble. As a matter of fact, I do, Susan replied. Patricia Gonzalez. She handled my divorce. She's expensive, but worth every penny. She made Charles regret the day he ever looked at his secretary. My next stop was the office of Patricia Gonzalez, the most formidable divorce attorney in our city. Susan had texted me her contact information with the message. She destroyed my cousin's ex-husband in court. She'll make Richard regret the day he met that little homewrecker. Patricia's office was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was a striking woman in her early 60s, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing in a tailored suit. That probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Tell me everything, she said after her assistant had brought us coffee in delicate porcelain cups. And don't leave anything out. I told her about our marriage, about Richard's affair, about his plans to divorce me. I told her about the money he'd been secretly transferring, and about my counter move at the bank that morning. Patricia nodded approvingly. Good. Too many women wait until the accounts are drained. She made notes as I spoke, her handwriting precise and elegant. Now, tell me about your contributions to the marriage. You mentioned supporting him through dental school? Yes, I worked as a teacher and waitress on weekends while he was in school. Then I stayed home with our children for 10 years while he built his practice. And his practice is successful? Very. He has 3 other dentists working for him now. They just expanded to a second location last year. Patricia's eyes gleamed. Mrs. Wilson, do you realize that you're entitled to a significant portion of that practice's value? You invested in his career. You sacrificed your own earning potential to raise your children and support his work. I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd always seen Richard's success as, well, Richard's, not something I had a claim to. And the house, Patricia continued. We bought it 15 years ago. It's worth about $1.2 million now. Both names on the deed. Yes, mortgage. Almost paid off. We have about $100,000 left. Patricia set down her pen and looked at me directly. Mrs. Wilson Margaret, based on what you've told me, you're in a very strong position. New York is an equitable distribution state. After a long-term marriage like yours, with your contributions to his career and to raising your family, you could be looking at 50 to 60% of all marital assets, including his business. For the first time since Richard had dropped his bombshell, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. Not quite hope, but possibility. He thinks he's going to walk away with most of our money. Doesn't he? I asked. Patricia smiled thinly. Men like your husband often do. They're in for a rude awakening. We spent the next hour discussing strategy. Patricia advised me to gather as much financial information as possible, to document everything, and to limit my communication with Richard to emails or texts that could be preserved as evidence. And Margaret, she added as I was leaving, don't move out of the house. No matter what. That's your home, and leaving could affect your claim to it. As I drove home, my phone rang. It was Emily, our daughter. Mom? Her voice was tight with emotion. Dad just called me. He said you two are separating, that he's moving out. What's going on? My heart sank. I wanted to tell our children myself to find the right words. Of course Richard had beaten me to it, probably spinning the story to make himself look better. Oh? Emily, I sighed, pulling over to the side of the road. This wasn't a conversation to have while driving. I was going to call you tonight. Yes, your father has decided he wants a divorce. He's seeing someone else. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then who? A hygienist from his office, Amber. She's 26. Are you kidding me? Emily's voice rose in disbelief. Dad is leaving you for someone younger than me? After everything you've done for him? After you beat cancer? I'm afraid so, sweetheart. That's disgusting. I can't believe he would do this to you. To us, I could hear the tears in her voice now. Mom, are you okay? Do you want me to come over? I can be there in 2 hours. Emily lived in Boston with her husband, Jake. They've moved there for his job in finance 3 years ago. And while I missed having her close, I've been grateful she found happiness. I'm managing, I said, surprised to find it was somewhat true. I've already spoken with a lawyer. I'm going to be fine. A lawyer, good. Emily sounded relieved. Don't let him take advantage of you, Mom. Michael, and I won't stand for it. Have you spoken to your brother? I asked. Not yet. I tried calling, but you know how busy he is with his residency. I left a message asking him to call me back. Let me tell him, Emily, please, I don't want him hearing this secondhand. Of course, Mom, just call me after, okay? And seriously, say the word and I'll come down. Jake understands. After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and strength. My children were adults now with their own lives, but they were still my children, and they were on my side. When I got home, there was an unfamiliar car in the driveway. For a moment, I thought Richard had returned, but then I saw her, a young woman with long blonde hair, wearing skinny jeans and a tight top that showed off her flat stomach. Amber. She was standing on my porch, looking nervous but determined. When she saw me, she straightened her shoulders. Mrs. Wilson, she said as I approached. I'm Amber. I think we need to talk. I felt a surge of anger so powerful it nearly took my breath away. The audacity of this girl, coming to my home. The home I built with Richard, where I'd raised my children, where I'd fought cancer and won. I have nothing to say to you, I replied, my voice ice cold as I moved to walk past her to my door. Please, she said, stepping in front of me. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. I know you must hate me, but there are things you should know. About Richard. Something in her tone made me pause. What things? Amber glanced around nervously, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. A diamond stud glinted there, expensive looking. A gift from Richard? Can we talk inside? I don't want anyone to see me here against my better judgment. I unlocked the door and led her into my living room. I didn't offer her a seat or a drink. I just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Richard told me he was separated when we started seeing each other. She blurted out, her words tumbling over each other. He said you had grown apart years ago, and were just staying together for appearances. For your kids. I laughed bitterly. And you believe that? The oldest line in the book. Amber flushed. I know how it sounds. But he was so convincing. He showed me an apartment he said he was living in. He talked about how lonely he was. How you hadn't been intimate. In years, that stung. Our sex life had slowed down, yes, especially after my cancer treatment. But we still had moments of passion. Or so I thought. That apartment he just rented last week, you mean? I asked, my voice sharp. Her eyes widened. What? Richard only moved out 2 days ago, Amber. We've been living together as husband and wife until then. She sank onto my couch uninvited. Her face pale. He lied to me. About everything. Welcome to the club, I said dryly. There's more, she continued, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. Last week I found messages on his phone. To other women. Dating apps. He's been talking to lots of women. Not just me. I should have felt another stab of betrayal. But instead, I just felt tired. Of course Richard hadn't stopped at one affair. Once a cheater. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Amber wiped at her eyes, careful not to smudge her mascara. Because I ended things with him when I found out and he got scary, threatening. Said I'd regret it if I told anyone about us. Said no one would believe a gold-digging slut over a respected doctor. That didn't sound like the Richard I knew. Or thought I knew. But then, nothing about this situation was familiar. And then yesterday, she continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. He came to my apartment, drunk. Said he was leaving you anyway, that I should take him back. When I refused, he grabbed me. Hard enough to leave bruises. She pulled up her sleeve to show me fingerprint marks on her arm. I felt sick. Did you report him? She shook her head. I was afraid. Of what he might do. Of not being believed. She looked at me pleadingly. But I thought you should know. The man you married. I don't think he exists anymore. We talked for another hour. Amber showed me text messages from Richard alternately loving and threatening. She told me about other women at the office he pursued. About how he'd begun drinking more heavily in recent months. About mood swings that had frightened her. I'm sorry, she said as she was leaving. I really am. I never would have gotten involved with him if I'd known the truth. I believed her. Strangely enough, she seemed genuinely remorseful. Genuinely frightened. As I watched her drive away, I wondered what other secrets Richard had been keeping. After Amber left, I sat in my living room for a long time, processing everything. The Richard she described manipulative, potentially violent, definitely predatory was a stranger to me. Had he always been this person, hiding behind the mask of a loving husband and father? Or had something changed him? It didn't really matter. What mattered was protecting myself and potentially others from whatever Richard had become. I called Patricia Gonzalez again and told her about Amber's visit. She listened intently. This changes things, she said when I finished. If he's been violent with this young woman, we need to proceed carefully. Your safety is a priority. I don't think he would hurt me, I said. Though I wasn't as certain as I once would have been. Let's not take chances. I'm going to file for an emergency hearing tomorrow morning. In the meantime, do you have somewhere else you can stay tonight? I thought about it. I could go to Susan's. Good. Pack a bag and go there now. Don't tell Richard where you're staying. As I was packing, my phone rang. Richard. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded without preamble. The bank called me about unusual activity on our account. You took everything, Margaret. Not everything, I replied calmly. Just what was left after you secretly withdrew $75,000 over the past 6 months. There was a pause. You had no right. I had every right. My name is on that account too. And unlike you, I'm not hiding money for a divorce you've been planning for months. This is exactly why I'm leaving, Richard hissed. You've always been so controlling, so rigid. Amber understands me. She supports me. I laughed. Does she? You might want to check with her about that. She paid me a visit today. Another pause. Longer this time. When Richard spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. What did she tell you? Everything. About how you lied to her about our marriage. About the other women. About how you grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises when she tried to end things. She's lying. Richard said quickly. She's unstable, jealous. She's making things up because I told her I was coming back to you. Save it for your lawyer, Richard. Mine will be in touch. I hung up, my heart pounding. I finished packing quickly and called Susan to tell her I was on my way. As I was loading my suitcase into the car, another vehicle pulled into the driveway, Richard. He got out, his face flushed with anger. We need to talk, Margaret, now. I stood my ground. I have nothing to say to you. You're not leaving this house, he said, moving toward me. Not until we sort this out. For a moment, I was afraid. The look in his eyes was one I'd never seen before. But then I remembered I wasn't alone. Susan was expecting me. Patricia knew my situation. My children were on my side. If you touch me, I said clearly, I will call the police. And then I will take everything in the divorce. Everything, Richard. He stopped, uncertainty flickering across his face. You're being hysterical. This isn't like you, you're right. The old Margaret would have begged you to stay. Would have blamed herself for not being enough for you. But that Margaret is gone. I got into my car and started the engine. By the way, I've spoken with Patricia Gonzalez. She's my liar now. Richard's face paled. Everyone in our social circle knew Patricia's reputation. You're making a mistake, Margaret. We can work this out between ourselves. No need for sharks like Gonzalez. Goodbye, Richard, I said, backing out of the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing there, looking suddenly small and uncertain. Susan lived in a cozy townhouse across town. She downsized after her divorce, saying she wanted a fresh start in a place without memories of Charles. When I arrived, she was waiting with a glass of wine and a sympathetic ear. You did the right thing, she assured me after I'd told her about my day. Getting a lawyer, protecting your assets, leaving the house temporarily. Richard won't know what hit him. I just can't believe this is happening, I said, sinking onto her guest room bed. I keep thinking I'll wake up, and it will all have been a bad dream. Susan sat beside me, taking my hand. I know. I felt the same way when Charles left. But trust me, it gets better. And from what you've told me, you're going to come out of this divorce in much better shape than Richard. That night, I slept fitfully, dreaming of Richard and Amber, of bank accounts draining away, of a future alone. I woke early, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. Before remembering where I was and why, Susan was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. There's someone here to see you, she said when I came downstairs in my robe. For a moment, I feared it was Richard. But then a tall figure rose from the dining table, and I recognized my son, Michael. I rushed to hug him, inhaling the familiar scent of the cologne I'd given him for Christmas. What are you doing here? Your residency. I got emergency leave, he said, hugging me tightly. Emily called me, told me what Dad did. I caught the first flight I could. Michael was in his second year of residency at a Chicago hospital, specializing in cardiology. He looked tired with dark circles under his eyes, but his expression was determined. You didn't have to come, I said, though I was deeply touched that he had. Yes, I did, Michael replied firmly. No one treats my mother this way. Not even Dad. Over breakfast, I filled Michael in on everything: Richard's affair, the money he'd hidden, Amber's visit, my meeting with Patricia. He listened intently, his expression darkening. I can't believe he would do this, Michael said when I finished. After everything you've done for him. For us, people change, I said softly. Not like this, Michael insisted. This isn't change. This is a complete personality transplant. The Dad I knew would never behave this way. I thought about what Amber had said. About Richard's mood swings, his drinking. I'm not sure I ever really knew him, I admitted. Michael reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Well, I know you. And you're going to get through this. Emily and I will make sure of it. Later that morning, Patricia called with news. The judge has granted our emergency motion, she said. Richard is temporarily barred from the house, and there's a freeze on all major financial assets pending a full hearing. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means you can go home safely. Richard can't enter the property without court permission, and neither of you can sell property or make large financial transactions without approval. What about his practice? I asked. The freeze doesn't affect day-to-day business operations, Patricia explained. But he can't sell it, transfer ownership, or take out loans against it. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Thank you, Patricia. Don't thank me yet, she replied. This is just the beginning. Richard's lawyer will fight back hard. But we're in a good position. Michael insisted on accompanying me back to the house. Just in case Dad decides to ignore the court order, he said grimly. But Richard wasn't there. The house was exactly as I'd left it, except for a large bouquet of roses on the kitchen counter. The card read simply, "We need to talk." Are either the flowers in the trash? The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, financial disclosures, and emotional conversations with our children. Michael stayed for 3 days before returning to Chicago, extracting a promise from me to call if I needed anything. Emily came down from Boston the following weekend, her small baby bump now visible. She'd barely spoken to Richard since learning about the divorce. He keeps calling, trying to explain, she told me as we sat in the garden, drinking lemonade, as if there's any explanation that would make this okay. He's still your father, Emily, I said. Though it cost me to be fair. I don't want you to cut him out of your life entirely. Emily's expression hardened. He made his choice, Mom. He chose that woman. Over his family, over you, over his future grandchild. She placed a protective hand over her belly. I'm not sure I want someone like that in my baby's life. I didn't want my children to cut their father out of their lives entirely. He was still their father. After all, but I appreciated their loyalty more than I could express. Patricia was as formidable as promised. She uncovered financial accounts Richard had hidden even from me, including an offshore account with nearly $200,000 in it. She deposed Amber, who bravely testified about Richard's lies and his aggressive behavior. She brought in a forensic accountant who valued Richard's dental practice at $3.2 million, far more than I'd realized. Richard's lawyer, a slick man named James Harrington, tried to argue that I was entitled to only a small portion of our assets, that the practice was Richard's alone, that I should be grateful for whatever he offered. Mrs. Wilson was a librarian, Harrington said dismissively during one particularly heated meeting. Dr. Wilson built a multi-million-dollar practice through his own skill and hard work. She contributed nothing to that. Patricia's eyes flashed dangerously. Mrs. Wilson put her own career on hold to support Dr. Wilson through dental school. She raised their children while he built his practice. She has been an equal partner in this marriage in every way that matters, and the court will recognize that. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Eleanor Simmons, seemed inclined to agree. During our first full hearing, she listened to both sides before speaking. Mr. Harrington, she said, peering over her glasses at Richard's lawyer, I've been on the bench for 27 years coincidentally, the same length as the Wilsons' marriage, and in that time, I've heard every argument imaginable for why a husband's career success should be attributed solely to him, regardless of his wife's sacrifices and support. She leaned forward. Those arguments rarely persuade me as the legal proceedings dragged on. Richard's life began to unravel in other ways. 2 more women came forward with stories similar to Amber's. He pursued them while married to me, lied about his situation, then turned nasty when things didn't go his way. The dental board opened an ethics investigation after one of these women, a former patient, filed a complaint. His partners at the practice, concerned about the negative publicity, asked him to take a leave of absence. Patients began canceling appointments, requesting other dentists. Through it all, Richard blamed me. He sent me angry texts accusing me of ruining his life, of turning everyone against him. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. One evening, about 4 months into the divorce proceedings, I was having dinner with Susan when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Wilson, a woman's voice said when I answered. This is Nurse Jenkins from Mercy Hospital. Your husband, Richard Wilson, has been admitted. My heart skipped a beat. Despite everything, I still cared what happened to Richard. What happened? Is he all right? He's stable, the nurse assured me. But he's asking for you. He was. Well, he was quite insistent. I looked at Susan, who was watching me with concern. What happened to him? I asked the nurse. I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, she replied. But he's in room 412 if you'd like to come see him. After I hung up, Susan shook her head. You're not seriously considering going, are you? After everything he's done. I sighed. I don't know. What if it's serious? What if he's really hurt? Then his girlfriend can take care of him, Susan said firmly. You're not his wife anymore, Margaret. Not in any way that matters. She was right, of course. But 27 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight. Neither does love, as much as I wished it would. I'll just stop by briefly, I decided. Make sure he's okay. Susan looked skeptical but didn't argue further. Want me to come with you? No. I'll be fine. I'll call you afterward. Mercy Hospital was on the other side of town, a modern facility where Michael had done part of his medical school training. I found room 412 easily enough and paused outside, steeling myself before knocking softly. Come in, Richard's voice called. He was sitting up in bed, a bandage around his head, his arm in a sling. He looked terrible pale, with dark circles under his eyes, but his face brightened when he saw me. Margaret, you came. The nurse said you were asking for me. I replied, staying near the door. What happened? Richard looked embarrassed. Car accident. Nothing serious. Concussion, dislocated shoulder. They're keeping me overnight for observation. I nodded, relieved it wasn't worse, but wondering why he'd asked for me. Well, I'm glad you're okay. I should go. Wait, Richard said quickly. Please, stay a minute. I've been wanting to talk to you against my better judgment. I moved further into the room, though I didn't sit down. What about? Richard sighed, wincing slightly at the movement. I've made a mess of things, Margaret. A complete mess. Yes, you have, I agreed, seeing no reason to soften the truth. Amber left me, he continued. Moved to California. Said she couldn't handle the drama. I wasn't surprised. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, not entirely sincerely. No, you're not, Richard said with a weak smile. And you shouldn't be. She was. It was a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. I crossed my arms. Richard, if you asked me here to try to reconcile. No, he said quickly. I know it's too late for that. I know I destroyed any chance of that. He looked down at his hands. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly sorry. For everything. I studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. The Richard I'd known for most of my adult life had rarely apologized for anything. He'd been proud, sometimes to a fault. But the man before me looked genuinely remorseful. What happened to you, Richard? I asked softly. How did we end up here? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he finally said. I think I was afraid of getting old. Of becoming irrelevant. When Amber showed interest in me, it was like I could pretend I was still young. Still vital. You were never irrelevant to me, I said. Or to our children. I know that now, Richard replied, his voice thick with emotion. But by the time I realized it, I'd already destroyed everything good in my life. We talked for another hour. Richard told me about his drinking, which had gotten worse after moving out. About the panic attacks he'd started having. About how empty his fancy apartment felt without family photos or memories. The accident was my fault, he admitted. I'd been drinking. Not enough to be legally drunk, but enough to affect my reflexes. I ran a red light, hit another car. Thank God no one was seriously hurt. I felt a complex mix of emotions: pity, anger, lingering affection, profound disappointment. You need help, Richard, I said finally. Professional help, he nodded. I know. I'm going to get it. I promise. As I was leaving, Richard called after me. Margaret, thank you for coming. I didn't deserve it, but thank you. I paused at the door. Get better, Richard. For yourself. For our children. For our grandchild. When I got home, I called Patricia and told her about my visit with Richard. Do you think his remorse is genuine? She asked. I do, I said after considering it. But it doesn't change anything. No, Patricia agreed. It doesn't. But it might make him more amenable to a fair settlement. She was right. The following week, Richard's lawyer contacted Patricia with a settlement offer. Richard would give me the house, 60% of all financial assets including the offshore account, and 50% of the value of the dental practice. He would keep his car, his personal possessions, and the downtown apartment he'd rented. This is surprisingly reasonable, Patricia said when she called to tell me. Do you want a counter? I thought about it. The offer was fair, more than fair. Really? And I was tired of fighting. No, I decided. If he's willing to settle on these terms, I'm willing to accept. There's one condition. Patricia added. He wants a non-disclosure agreement. You can't speak publicly about the divorce or about his behavior. I considered this. Part of me wanted the world to know what Richard had done, how he betrayed me. But another part, the part that remembered the good years, that recognized he was still the father of my children, didn't want to humiliate him further. That's fine, I said. I have no interest in airing our dirty laundry. Finally, 6 months after that fateful evening at our kitchen table, we had a settlement conference. Richard looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. His lawyer looked grim. Patricia laid out our acceptance of the terms. Richard nodded, not meeting my eyes. This is highway robbery, Harrington protested, though it seemed half-hearted. Dr. Wilson built that practice. Mrs. Wilson hasn't worked there a day in her life. Mrs. Wilson worked plenty, Patricia countered. She worked as a teacher and waitress to put Dr. Wilson through dental school. She worked raising their children while he built his career. She worked managing their household so he could focus on his practice. The law recognizes the value of that work. Even if you don't, the judge nodded. I'm inclined to agree with Ms. Gonzalez. This seems like a fair division given the length of the marriage and Mrs. Wilson's contributions. Richard leaned over and whispered something to his lawyer, who then asked for a brief recess. When we reconvened, Harrington announced that Richard was willing to accept our terms, with a non-disclosure agreement as previously discussed. We accept, Patricia said. And just like that, it was over. 27 years of marriage, dissolved in a sterile conference room with the stroke of a pen. As we were leaving, Richard approached me in the hallway. He looked defeated. Are you happy now? He asked bitterly. You've taken everything. I looked at him for the first time in months. The man I loved for most of my adult life. The father of my children. A stranger. I didn't take anything, Richard, I said quietly. I kept what was rightfully mine. There's a difference, he shook his head. I never thought you'd be so vindictive. So cold. And I never thought you'd throw away our life together for some misguided quest for youth. I replied. I guess we both misjudged each other. Richard's face hardened. At least I was honest about what I wanted. I needed more than what we had. I needed to feel alive again. I studied him for a moment. This man who had once been my whole world. Then I leaned in close and delivered the 2 sentences I'd been holding back for months. You didn't need youth, Richard. You needed my money to fund your midlife crisis. And now you'll have to face growing old alone, broke. And with the knowledge that your children see you for exactly what you are. The color drained from his face. For once, he had no comeback, no justification. Because he knew I was right, I turned and walked away, leaving Richard standing there in the courthouse hallway. I didn't look back. Patricia caught up with me outside. "Are you okay?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. "Yes," I said, surprised to find it was true. "I really am." The next few months were a period of adjustment. I stayed in my house now, finding comfort in its familiar spaces, but also making changes. I repainted the master bedroom in a soft blue I'd always loved but Richard had vetoed. I converted his office into a reading room, with a comfortable chaise lounge and built-in bookshelves. I planted new flowers in the garden, bright, bold varieties I'd never tried before. Emily's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She and Richard had a tentative reconciliation. After he entered therapy and joined AA, their relationship wasn't what it had been. But they were talking again, which was a start. Michael was more resistant, but he too began taking his father's calls. I focused on my work at the library, on my friends, on preparing for my first grandchild. Susan and I took a weekend trip to New York City, something we talked about for years but never done. We saw a Broadway show, ate at fancy restaurants, and shopped at stores we couldn't really afford. It was exhilarating. Richard and I communicated only through lawyers or occasionally about matters concerning our children. I heard through Emily that he'd sold his downtown apartment and bought a smaller condo, that he was dating again, women his own age now, that the ethics investigation had ended with a formal reprimand, but he kept his license, that he was slowly rebuilding his practice, though it would never be what it once was. I found I didn't care much about Richard's life anymore, not out of bitterness, but because I was too busy with my own. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Emily gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Sophia. I was in the delivery room, holding Emily's hand through her labor, crying tears of joy when the doctor placed the tiny, red-faced infant on her chest. Richard came to the hospital the next day. It was the first time we'd seen each other since the courthouse. He looked better, he'd gained back some weight, and there was color in his face again. He brought flowers for Emily and a stuffed bear for Sophia. "Congratulations, Grandma," he said to me, his tone awkward but sincere. "Thank you," I replied. "Congratulations to you too, Grandpa." It was a small moment of civility, of shared joy in our new grandchild. Not forgiveness exactly, but a step towards something like peace. 1 year after Richard told me he needed youth, I retired from the library as planned. My colleagues threw me a party, presenting me with a first edition of my favorite Jane Austen novel and a gift certificate for a spa weekend. I felt appreciated, valued, loved. I began traveling Paris in the spring, a Mediterranean cruise in the summer. I took cooking classes and joined a hiking group. I volunteered at a literacy program, teaching adults to read. I dated occasionally, nothing serious. Just dinner and conversation with interesting men I met through friends or community events. There was a professor of literature at the local university, a widower named David. We met at a book club and connected over a shared love of mystery novels. We began meeting for coffee once a week, talking about books and life and our families. It was nice, simple, no pressure. Sometimes in quiet moments, I thought about those 27 years with Richard, not with regret or anger anymore, but with a kind of detached wonder. How could I have given so much of myself to someone who valued it so little? How could I have been so blind to who he really was? But then I looked at Sophia, at the life I was building now, and I realized it wasn't all a waste. Without those 27 years, I wouldn't have my children. I wouldn't have my granddaughter. I wouldn't be the woman I am today, stronger, wiser, more self-reliant than I ever thought possible. Richard said he needed youth, but what he really needed was to feel powerful, to feel in control. He thought leaving me would give him that power. Instead, it gave it to me. My phone buzzes with a text from David. "Still on for coffee tomorrow? Found a first edition of that Austen you've been looking for." I smile and text back, "Wouldn't miss it." The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sophia stirs in her sleep, making those little baby noises that melt my heart. I reach over and gently stroke her cheek. This isn't the life I planned. It's better. better.